This is Mel Pine. Welcome to an episode of From the Pure Land. That was probably not the opening music you expected to hear. This podcast is titled The Jazz of Buddhism, Mastering the Fundamentals to Make Something Beautiful and Your Own. I wish I could tell you the name of the clarinetist in the 1-minute audio you heard. He's unidentified in the clip I found in a search for versions of the introduction to George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. The iconic clarinet glissando opening was born in an improvisation during rehearsal. Clarinetist Ross Gorman playfully improvised the swoop, which Gershwin decided to keep. Many performances of the piece since feature personalized variations, sometimes with extended, jazzier phrasing or interaction with the ensemble. Here's trumpeter Dave Elton with just the opening sweep. Some purists think music should always be played and sung as written. There have always been variations, but American jazz grew from African musical traditions brought by enslaved Africans to America and characterized by complex rhythms, call and response patterns, polyrhythms, improvisation, and the use of slightly flattened or bent pitches. Blues, a deeply expressive form that emerged from work songs, field hollers, and spirituals. Ragtime, a syncopated piano style popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Spirituals and work songs. European harmonic traditions. Marching band music, especially prominent in New Orleans, where brass bands were common at parades, funerals, and celebrations. And finally, Caribbean and Latin rhythms, particularly from Cuba and the Caribbean. I've been thinking about jazz as a way to express my idea of a new middle way for Buddhism in the West, which might be expressed this way. 1. Get a good foundational understanding of Buddhism. 2. Strive to live with compassion, loving-kindness, generosity, patience, and a practice of meditation or contemplation. 3. Follow the ethical guidelines of non-harm, honesty, and integrity to reduce suffering for yourself and others. 4. Find a teacher, preferably one who can help you overcome clinging and aversion, make friends with your mind, and let go of your grasping ego. 5. When you are confident that you are not under the control of your grasping mind and ego, keep practicing and learning, as all good musicians do, but stop trying to be other than you are. Coming back to the idiom of jazz, consider some of the greats. Dave Brubeck didn't wake up one day and start playing in 5/4 time. He studied composition with Darius Milhaud at Mills College, one of the most respected classical composers of his time, and with Arnold Schoenberg, who invented 12-tone composition. McCoy Tyner. Before revolutionizing jazz piano with John Coltrane, he studied classical theory and harmony at the Granoff School of Music in Philadelphia and was deeply influenced by classical composers like Stravinsky and Debussy. Benny Goodman. Before he became the king of swing, he spent 2 years studying clarinet with Franz Schulp, a member of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, Later in his career, when he wanted to expand his range, he studied with Reginald Kell, another classical master. Goodman went on to commission works from Bela Bartok, Aaron Copland, and Paul Hindemith. Nina Simone wanted to be a classical concert pianist. That was her dream. She studied at Juilliard, worked with Carl Friedberg and Vladimir Sokolov, and was a devoted student of Bach under her teacher, Muriel Masinovich. When she was rejected from the Curtis Institute, which she always believed was because of racism, she created something entirely her own, blending gospel, blues, folk, and jazz in a way nobody had done before. She became famous by bringing her expressive voice to her piano virtuosity. When Miles Davis played My Funny Valentine and John Coltrane interpreted My Favorite Things, they weren't following sheet music. They had internalized the melody so completely that they could play with it, stretch it, reshape it, make it say something new every time. But they could do that because they understood their craft and the melody in ways that bypassed cognitive thought and analysis. Becoming an author has brought me more visibility and engagement with hundreds, maybe thousands, of Buddhists and those wanting to learn about Buddhism. I've learned how many of them believe there's only one way to be a Buddhist and practice Buddhism, their way. Ask 10 Buddhists how to define the faith, and you'll get 11 answers, with 5 of them delivered with my way or the highway certainty. I guess beginner's mind isn't part of their understanding. I've been criticized for using the phrase new middle way. I knew I was being presumptuous in adopting it, but I wanted to make the point that for Buddhism to thrive in the West, maybe we need a path that steers between secularism and strict traditionalism. Over the last day or so, I realized I'm talking about Jazzy Buddhism, bringing what came from the East and making it into something slightly different, still based on the fundamentals, still beautiful, and still improvisational. I say still improvisational because the Buddha taught his followers to test every spiritual concept the way a goldsmith tests gold. They should accept only those teachings that lead to benefit and happiness. He didn't preach thou shalt nots. He taught guidelines like the Eightfold Path, clearly aimed at grown-ups, making difficult grown-up decisions. How you play the notes is up to you as long as you always keep reducing suffering and promoting benefit and happiness as your goal. Don't start improvising, though, until you have internalized the basics. But likewise, don't get stuck in the fundamentals forever. You're not trying to become an ancient museum piece perfectly replicating ancient forms. You are learning the structure so you can eventually transcend it. You learn traditional Buddhist practices so you can adapt them to your actual life. This jazz analogy makes clear that you can't just wing it. You can't improvise jazz without learning music theory. Worthwhile improvisation comes from deep knowledge of the underlying structure. You can't read a book on Buddhism and think you've got enlightenment figured out. You need a constant practice. You need to sit even when it's boring. You need to keep coming back to the cushion, keep observing your mind, keep noticing where you cause yourself and others unnecessary suffering. That's your practice time. But I see too many students of Buddhism getting stuck in school, as though they're waiting to hear this. But graduation comes from within, when wisdom becomes second nature. When McCoy Tyner, in his 20s, was playing with John Coltrane, he wasn't thinking about which scale to use. The music just flowed through him because he'd put in thousands of hours of practice first. He continued to practice and perform into his 7th decade, after more than 50 years of performing professionally. Many great musicians, especially in jazz and classical, practiced and performed into their 80s and even 90s. You won't stop practicing your faith, meditating, and going to retreats after you've internalized the fundamentals. But at some point, you need to take ownership of what we Tibetan Buddhists call Vajra pride, the certainty that you are already a Buddha. You don't need pomp and circumstance as long as you have awareness, clarity, and compassion.